What is up, dudes and dudes? It is me, of course, Sugi JRPG here, and today I'm gonna be reviewing Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin for PS5. But before you go into my individual review and thoughts about the game, I want to first break down a bit of the premise and the setting. What exactly is Stranger of Paradise exactly about? So Stranger of Paradise is like a dark fantasy interpretation of the original Final Fantasy I game. It follows our main character known as Jack, who's basically consumed by the idea to destroy or kill chaos. And you have probably seen many trailers and where we have these famous Jack one-liners. We need to destroy chaos. Where is chaos? I gotta kill chaos. Like, you know, and at first when those initial trailers came out of the game, people were very cringing at these dialogues that Jack basically had. But there were a lot of people actually who kind of fell in love with the dialogue that Jack was basically spouting throughout the game. And I have to admit that there is something about the Jack's character that has a certain type of different appeal, because this is not exactly a dialogue that you would expect from a main character in any game whatsoever. So there's a certain type of appeal to that type of a dialogue. And basically, you know, they are joined by, or Jack is joined by other companions such as Ash and Jed, who are kind of on his quest to basically destroy chaos with him. And then there will be some other characters also joining them later down throughout the game, and they will be visiting different types of locations in the original Final Fantasy I game. Not exactly all the locations in the original game. It kind of focuses on like maybe 2 or 3 fundamental key points, like Cornelia, which is kind of like the main city where the whole story starts in the initial game. And there's probably going to be a lot of things that you're going to be able to appreciate if you have played the first game. I never like completed, you know, Final Fantasy 1. It was never like something that really drew me in. I mean, the first Final Fantasy game that I played was 9, and it was really hard for me generally just go back into these 2D versions. I mean, 4 and 5 and 6 are great, but I mean, the 1 and 2 were kind of, you know, rough on the edges. I have to admit, they haven't like exactly aged that amazing in terms of like story-wise combat and all those elements, even though there has been many integrations and I mean remasters out of those games. Now let's kind of go into explaining a bit about the characters. So as I kind of already said, Jack is the main character. The all other characters are kind of filler-ish and not exactly like super interesting, or they kind of feel, you know, very dull at times, and their dialogue is very like generic. I mean, they're just, I guess, just wanted to write in party members into the combat system. So, and obviously there are some aspects that kind of, you know, entwines them into the actual plot, and you know, things are going to be a lot more clear once you actually get in the very end of the game and what is the role of the actual, you know, companions. But fundamentally, like, a lot of the characters are not exactly like that well written. I think the most appealing characters here obviously are Jack and also another side character, Astos, which seem to be probably my favorite character in the whole game, even though not playable, but still kind of like a very interesting type of character. And I also really like the art direction that they went with him. Now let's kind of get into now the aspects of the actual combat and the systems and everything work, and this was obviously done by Koei, which are obviously known from Nioh and some other, like, I think Ninja Gaiden and all these types of games. But fundamentally, like, Nioh is a very much like an interpretation of the Souls games, and this is not a Souls game. People have been contrasting this to Dark Souls and Elden Ring, but fundamentally this game does not have a stamina system. You can sprint much as you want. You're not exactly able to like increase your attributes. None of the other like elements inside the game really are reminiscent of the Dark Souls, you know, system, outside from going into save points, which actually reset the dungeon's monsters. And obviously there's loot, but the loot system fundamentally works very differently in this game than it does on other Dark Souls games. So fundamentally, like, this is not a Dark Souls game, and it's a lot more action-oriented, it's a lot more button smashing, and it's not so much about like reading the enemy's movements and doing counterattacks. It's just more about like just going all ham in and then suddenly like throwing a potion there and there. But fundamentally, like, I think it's a very bad faith comparison to say that this is like a Soul style of a game. Yeah, I can see some elements there being similar, but fundamentally this is definitely like an action oriented game, you know, reminiscent to a lot of the Dynasty Warriors, the Samurai Warriors games, but maybe not as fast and not maybe as combo heavy as those games are. Now, the combat altogether, like, we're gonna get into that in a second, but I first want to kind of lay out some other important aspects about this game. Like, one of the things I didn't really like about the maps inside the game, there's like maybe 15, 16 different levels in the game. There's a bit of variety there, but most of them are kind of linear. But the fundamental problem is that there was no minimap inside this game, and I got lost in some of these levels, like where I exactly had to go, especially on those maps where you had to go kind of back and forth, go to the elevator, open up this door, and minimap would have been, I think, I don't know exactly why you wouldn't do such a quality of life change there and just like add this element there, especially when you are like in a party system inside the game. You don't exactly have a good idea where your party member is if he's like very far away. Like you maybe guess an idea, is he on the lower level or upper level based on the icon that you see on the map, but fundamentally like in the map wise, it's sometimes you can kind of get lost on the actual certain maps inside the game. So that was something I didn't actually like. And in terms of like the gameplay experience, so it can be played as a co-op. I think you can play up to 3 party members, so you can invite 2 friends to play with you. And definitely this game is a lot better to play as a co-op experience. So I would say like it goes like a 1 grade up altogether by playing this game on co-op, because then when you play on co-op, there is a resurrection system inside the game. You have Phoenix down, and also your friend can use a potion on you to basically heal you out in case you're out of Phoenix downs. Normally, you just die instantly, and even your NPC party members are not able to basically revive you. So co-op in this game, I think, is a very essential selling point and the gameplay experience, and you're just gonna enjoy the game a lot better to play it on co-op. And that's how I played through the game. There's only like a couple of missions towards the end which have to be played on solo, which fundamentally was a bad design choice, because if you're going to be allowing people to play with you like basically 90% of the game, why not allow them to basically pay wait till the end, okay? Lore reasons, I can understand why this was not possible, but fundamentally like this was not a good choice in my opinion to play the last 2 maps basically fully on solo. And also I want to say that the NPC AI is not really great on this game. Like, they don't have a tank class which could draw aggro from the enemies. There's not exactly a healer class here which could heal you, because the characters in this game are very glass cannon, and you have 2 methods of blocking. So you have the normal blocking, which I'm obviously very used to using from Dark Souls and Souls types of games. And that was probably one of the reasons I died a lot in this game, because the actual blocking is really weak, even if you are using a shield class. So basically, you're kind of forced to dodge or use basically the soul parry mechanism, which I didn't really like to use, and maybe I should have, and maybe I wouldn't have died so much if I would have used this soul parry system. But it was weird to have 2 forms of blocking systems inside the game. I would rather have just, you know, ditch the soul parry altogether and have some type of like a time blocking system which would have like replaced that. So soul parry, not to my liking, but it's kind of like a fundamental part about the staying alive inside the game, because as I said, the characters are glass cannon. You can suddenly just die on 3 hits. The bosses mostly have abilities which are going to be taking 30% of your health or more, depending on like how low your item here is. And so you can die really fast, and that's not really great on the single player experience, as I said, because you're not able to revive yourself. You're just going to instantly die. Now let's go into the bit of the item system here, which is frankly pretty bad. So in a nutshell, basically you get a bunch of items on all of the maps, and you're constantly going to be reshuffling your items. There's an auto optimization button which basically auto equips all the items for you and your party members, which I was basically using 99% of the time, because basically you're just getting more items all the time which are better than the ones that you had on the last level. So there was fundamentally too much items, and there's also a system to basically upgrade the items and the attributes in them, but there was no point of doing that, because you were getting just another new item on the next map, which was better than the last one. So fundamentally, there was too much items coming in, and it felt very meaningless to basically like, you know, go through any type of like setting for your gear, because like maybe 2 out of 5 times course of a certain maps, you're gonna be changing your gear because the new gear basically coming in. And maybe towards like the very end game of the you know, we're talking about end game, post game content here, maybe there you're going to be customizing your items more because you're basically having the highest level items already inside the game, so you only need to max them out. But fundamentally, like as you go through the main game, you don't have any reason to basically go to the blacksmith and, you know, improve your items. So I think the item system was kind of for it. And also, like, you had the ability to auto-dismantle them after every level, and you had to, like, constantly adjust the level, okay? Every item that's lower than 100 levels is going to be auto-dismantled, and because the item levels jumped so much per level, per map, per mission, you just had to, like, constantly, you know, change that option, and it was kind of annoying, to be honest. And so I wasn't very big fan of the item system because a lot of the elements really relied on that. All the stats and like basically how much damage you did and everything was really reliant on the items. And then there's obviously the job system, which, you know, it was fine. It was kind of broken down to 2 different categories. You had the melee classes, and then you had the casters. And there was, I think, like over 30 classes in the game in total, which is a lot of variety. Some of them are very similar to each other. Some of the base classes have less weapons that they can use, like shields and stuff like that. And the later classes basically had a lot more access to different abilities. And the touch trees basically would increase the synergy of the basically the class traits and stuff like that, but like I felt fundamentally like the job levels didn't have much impact on my character's growth. And also because I had to change classes, because you go to the tier 1 class, the tier 2, to advanced, and yada yada. So a lot of that progress felt kind of meaningless. And I felt like they could have balanced the game a lot more to have like a real levels inside the game, which would increase your attributes. And then you would have the job class, which would basically maybe increase your damage with certain types of weapons. And then top of that, you would have the items as well. But I fundamentally didn't like this game design balancing that they had for this game. I felt that the job system should have been more important, more impactful in terms of raw stats. And maybe they could, the specific job trees could have been longer. Something that, like, you know, they are all level 30, but maybe they could have been up to 50 and just like crunch and reduce the amount of classes there because they were not really that different from each other. So we could have less classes which you're going to be using for a longer time, and same thing could be said for the items. I wish we had items which we would have used for multiple levels, so we wouldn't have constant change of these classes and items on every goddamn level, which was kind of annoying. In terms of the OST, I think it was really high tier. There was really some good battle tracks out there that were very appealing to me. So I think they did a pretty good job with the overall OST here. The Sinatra song that they had, I think it was Frank Sinatra, totally missed the mark. It felt very unnatural and non-fitting to any of the setting of the game or the overall plot here. So I was not really a big fan of that. But mostly, yes, OST very good. Now, there is a post-game and obviously DLC for Stranger of Paradise. I mean, there's a whole season pass which comes out with a lot of new missions, bosses, and obviously new items. There is post-game, which revolves mostly around like redoing the same missions. Some missions might be recreated that they may only feature a boss, or certain pathways have been reorganized, or the missions are a bit shorter, or they start from the other end. But basically you do them to basically get higher loot and level up your jobs. But towards the end of the game, most of your job levels are going to be maxed out if you have done any of the side missions for a while. So fundamentally, like, okay, you know, there is post-game content, and that's good, but if you're not really interested in the items, you're probably not going to be delving into that. Now let's get into a bit of the spoiler territory here regarding this game. So what I really want to say here, that this was pretty enjoyable experience despite like all of the flaws that the game has. Like, you know, it was a fun ride. That's what co-op games fundamentally are, and it wouldn't be as nice of an experience if I had to play the whole game alone. I probably would have finished it a lot more, like, you know, later down the line, or I would just reduce the difficulty and play it on the easiest level, which is story mode. And in total there's 4. Once you complete the game, there's going to be a 4th and the hardest one, which is called the chaos mode. Now, let's kind of get into the spoiler territory of the story. Now, I mean, the name kind of already tells a lot. Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. So it's an origin story. Who is it of the origin story of? It is out of Jack. And what is Jack's surname, which is told many times throughout the story? It's Garland. And Jack Garland obviously is the same Garland that is the first boss and the last boss of Final Fantasy 1. So it was kind of like very clear at that point that this is the origin story, the prequel story to Final Fantasy 1. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, a lot of the other characters in the story felt kind of meaningless, all things considered. I mean, Final Fantasy 1 was never like this amazing story to begin with. I mean, there are a lot of these dumbass plot devices which I don't generally like. For example, like amnesia, time resets, time traveling. These are story devices that amateur writers basically delve into. Like, if you don't know anything about writing, those are the story plots that you're always going to be using most of the time, because they allow you to do some crazy dumbass shit to compensate for bad writing, which ends up being bad writing anyway. So, and there's that time reset thing that's going on the story. I thought it was fundamentally kind of dumb. But this idea that Jack going into this journey and realizing that he was going to become Chaos himself and realizing that was the plan of everything, like a lot of the story, there's like a huge story thump towards like the last 3 missions where everything is basically revealed. Before that, you're getting like small tidbits and clues about what's going on here exactly and their path to destroy Chaos. But fundamentally, like, everything is revealed towards the end. Everything makes sense. In the sense that, okay, you get what the gist is, but not saying that the story and everything of the plan exactly makes sense. Like, why are they doing this? And the time resets and, you know, battling them again in 2,000 years. And, like, this is ridiculous stuff, which I don't really fundamentally enjoy. And, but, you know, I think a lot of Final Fantasy 1 original fans are going to be enjoying that a lot. But I mean, the story wasn't really like as super bad as like maybe some people made it out to be, and the initial trailers made it out to be. When I saw the initial trailer, I had zero expectations of any form of a story here. But I mean, it turned out to be like somewhat okay. I would have definitely changed certain things there and there, but and some of the things kind of were ridiculous. But I mean, it's not really bad as some people make it out to be, because let's be honest, the Final Fantasy story quality has been a bit of a roller coaster as of late, ever since we kind of, you know, moved from Final Fantasy X. But overall, guys, I mean, it was a solid, okay game. And definitely when you play it with a friend or with friends. But I mean, as a single player experience, I can't really say that the game is that great. Unless you really like dungeon crawlers where items, you like to grind Diablo and get the better items and you're super focused on the items all the time, maybe then you're going to be enjoying this game a lot more than I did. But I kind of played for the combat, which was pretty good, you know. There were some balancing issues there and there which I would have changed. Maybe I would have enjoyed the game be a lot more like Souls, or maybe I would have removed some of the Souls elements. But, you know, and in terms of like the bang for the buck, it was roughly 20-hour game for me, which I think is a good amount of time for an action game, because, you know, some of these games can tend to be like 10 hours long when we're looking into a lot of mainline action games out there. So 20 hours is pretty good, and that's like just the mainline story with doing a couple of the side missions. But if you're going to be delving into post-game content, you can squeeze out a lot more, and if you want to level up all the classes to 30 and etc., you can find a lot of things to do inside this game which are going to be, you know, increasing that replayability. And obviously the party system just allows you to jump into other people's games and help them out to, you know, defeat the bosses and things like that. And obviously 4 different difficulty settings which are also going to be allowing you to have some replayability. And obviously there are multiple different classes out there which offer different types of play style, from spears to swords and katanas, and obviously you have shields, and you have all the magic stuff. So you can play the game through as a mage the next time, or you can play the game through as a warrior the next time. So there's a lot of options there, which is good. But overall, like, Stranger of Paradise is okay. Probably not going to be paying for the season pass. I will be just probably watching the story sequences for this one. But, you know, don't expect a massive, amazing story here. That's not that type of a game. And just to say it out for the millionth time, if you have a friend to play with, it's definitely going to be a better experience. And obviously I would also argue that getting it on PC or PS5 is probably the best one. I think that the game could have looked a lot better, and the maps could have been a bit bigger and maybe less like linear if they would have gone for a PS5 as their main base console for this game instead of PS4, which already starts to feel very outdated at this point. But thanks for watching. As always, subscribe, like, and share, and check out other reviews on the channel. Stay tuned for more this year.